Before that on Radio 4, Political Animals, the first in a series of 4 scurrilous talks given by well-known, if unreliable, Downing Street cats, who relate their trials and tribulations under 4 different prime ministers. This week, Wilberforce, who, despite the odd escape attempt, served his country faithfully alongside Margaret Thatcher.
How could I have been so blind? Like so many others, I was hostile to Margaret to begin with. I was wedded to outdated methods of mousing and didn't see why I had to change, but I was wrong. I admit that now. Why did it take me so long to realize I was in the presence of greatness?
Wilberforce, Chief Mouser to the Cabinet Office, 1973 to 1987.
I suppose I got used to a relaxed lifestyle under Ted, Harold and Jim, my owners before Margaret. I was getting soft. I lost my self-respect. If the choice is between raw mouse and smoked trout pate the country can ill afford, I now realise, I'll pass on the raw mouse, thank you. The truth is I'd become part of what Margaret calls the dependency culture. I was living beyond my means. I was particularly fond of Harold. In the evening I'd sit on his lap being fed tidbits as he confided how a rogue faction in MI5 was trying to destroy him. Or did he mean the furnishing giant MFI? Sometimes I'd doze off and I'd miss the end of his stories. Anyway, Harold resigned, unless, of course, he was forced out by the rogue faction in MFI, and after Harold, Jim moved in for a few years, and then came Margaret.
Where there is discord, may we bring harmony. Where there is error, may we bring truth.
There were no more trees under Margaret. Under a good thing, too. I won't deny it took a while to come round to her way of thinking. For me, the first rule of mousing was respect your opponent. I was brought up in a more chivalrous age, you see, but Margaret sees this as wet. Then, I'm summoned to see Margaret. She shows me a mouse she's caught in one of these new humane traps. I'm told these things catch mice without harming them, she announces, allowing one to release them in the wild. Have I misunderstood her, and she's really just a pussycat, if I can put it like that? Suddenly, she produces this mallet and brings it down on the humane trap, and then, fixing me with a gimlet stare, she tells me Downing Street cats of yore were made of sterner stuff. Mr. Churchill's cat used to kill dogs and bring them home. She also says she intends to monitor my progress by getting MFI to positively vet me. Is positive vetting code for being doctored? These assessments will be ongoing, she adds. Does that mean they can doctor you more than once? To demonstrate positive vetting, she uses a stapler on a picture of Michelangelo's David, or on one part of his anatomy in particular. It was then that I realized my mousing methods were outmoded and unsuited to modern times. And Margaret reacts to my total capitulation to her worldview by magnanimously hurling a shoe at me when we pass on the stairs. Oh, a wonderful woman. I've just been in to see Margaret. She's on fantastic form. She asked if I had any plans to buy the cat basket I thought I already owned. She told me she's very keen on something called a property-owning democracy, adding that only a spineless sponger will continue to live in a state-subsidized cat basket without trying to raise the capital to buy it. What could I say? She wiped the floor with me. I didn't have a paw to stand on. Oh, wonderful woman. I'd just been in to see Margaret again, and, well, she tells me my opposition to gas privatisation is contemptible, even though, being a cat, I'm not sure what gas privatisation is. But how dare I not have any views? Well, no, she's right to challenge my lazy assumptions, well, whatever they aren't. So she's brilliant, just brilliant. The way she crushed me. Oh, wonderful woman. Margaret asked to see me again, and, well, if she crushed me last time, today she chopped me into tiny pieces and put me in the blender. To say that I worship this woman doesn't even begin to cover it. And worship implies she's just a god or someone second-rate like that. Anyway, she wants to know what I'm going to contribute to a task force that's about to sail to the Falkland Islands, or am I just going to sit here in Downing Street and leave it to our boys? She says she's going to make me yomp across the Falklands with a backpack. Or she might give me to a friend, General Pinochet in Chile, so he can use me in animal experiments. Wonderful woman. Oh, what a dreadful nightmare. Dreamt I was back in the dark days of Ted, and he was cruelly feeding me smoked salmon. Then Ted transformed into Harold, and I was sitting on his knee, and he was stroking me. And then just horrible, Jim asked his aide for some balls of wool so I could play with them. Thank goodness it was all just a nightmare, and Margaret's still in charge. Oh, hurrah! Watch Margaret being interviewed by a Dimbleby. She's uncovered yet another enemy within, nurses. She accuses them of mewling and puking. Cats also mewl and puke. Note to myself, don't mewl and puke in Margaret's presence in case she decides I'm also an enemy within, like nurses and miners. Mewl and puke when introduced to a woman called Esther Ranson, who's filming at number 10. But when she picks me up, help me, Esther. I'm being held against my will. Take me with you when you leave. Oh, what was I thinking? Why would I want to leave Margaret? Anyway, the nation sees me on TV and sends me presents. Margaret reminds me, and she's right to do so, that as a civil servant I'm not allowed gifts. I know that sounds vindictive, but Margaret is above such petty emotions, and she's definitely not doing this because I get sent more presents than her. Next day she reads me an extract from a report she's commissioned from furnishing giant MFI. The cat Wilberforce not only courts publicity, it concludes, he revels in it. That makes him susceptible to flattery, and we therefore conclude he's a possible security risk. Margaret wins the election. 4 more years of Margaret. Hurrah! Margaret celebrates by having a few people round, and they raise a glass to a group of shadowy backers called the Friends of Margaret Thatcher. This group is dedicated to keeping Margaret in power forever, and its patrons include David Owen, Arthur Scargill and Tony Benn. And there are new members coming up all the time. Margaret, great talent spotter, has her eye on someone called Neil Kinnock. With this elite behind her...
Yes, I hope to go on and on.
Margaret will be my owner forever. Hurrah! Margaret brings home from a trip to Moscow a tin of sardines, which I adore and haven't had since Jim lived here. These, she declares, were caught by a state-run fishing fleet, processed in a state-run factory and sold in a state-run supermarket. And until a few moments ago, Wilberforce, I was going to give them to you, but I can't let you eat sardines that have never known freedom in the West. And throws the tin unopened into the waste paper basket.
I like Mr. Gorbachev. We can do business together.
Then the man responsible for giving Russian sardines such a hard time comes to number 10. And when he picks me up, please help me, Mr. Gorbachev. I'm being held against my will. Take me back to Russia. I know you're cruel to your sardines, but I'm a cat, so I don't really care. Again, what was I thinking? Anyway, thank goodness Mr. Gorbachev doesn't take me back to Russia. He would have spoiled me like Ted, Harold and Jim, and I'd simply hate that. All in all, a narrow escape. Later, Margaret has a get-together for ex-prime ministers, and that's when I see them. Margaret tells them she's a better prime minister than they were, but because they're all old now and their hearing isn't up to much, they all nod in agreement. Seeing Ted, Harold and Jim together, I'm suddenly overcome and start purring bitterly and brush against their legs, hoping to topple them over as punishment for the relaxed lifestyle they imposed on me.
Help me, Ted, Harold and Jim. I'm being held against my will. Let me live with you in your retirement home.
What is wrong with me? Why do I keep on doing this? Why would I want to go off and live with 3 men who surrendered to my every whim? Oh, suddenly Ted makes a lunge for Margaret and tries to kill her. And then as security people pull him off, he tells her she never did have a sense of humour, and it's typical of her to overreact to his light-hearted assassination attempt. Ted tried to kill Margaret because he was shocked at what he perceived to be a decline in his beloved Wilberforce. It's true I may have lost a bit of weight, but I'm a leaner, fitter cat now, better able to survive in a more competitive environment.
I hope to go on and on and on.
Margaret wins another election. 4 more years of Margaret. Margaret is always telling people they need to live in the real world like her. Margaret is currently living in something called a bunker. Well, I know this because everyone keeps saying she's developed a bunker mentality. And when you develop a bunker mentality, you rely on a small circle of trusted advisors whose advice you don't trust. You also start saying things like,
We have become a grandmother.
One evening, some of the advisors whose advice she doesn't trust tell her they're off to see Les Miserables, but Margaret won't let them go because the hero is French, and the French have stolen our money, which she's trying to get back. Next day, she accuses me of helping France bring the country to its knees. Well, why did I do that? I already brought the country to its knees by eating smoked trout pate in the dark days of Ted, Harold and Jim, and here I am doing it again. I really must stop bringing the country to its knees. Later, I make an unjustified escape bid through a window someone has left open. I'm brought back to number 10 by armed police, and a good thing, too. I'm proud that this is my first escape bid in which I haven't asked others to assist me. Proof that I'm a cat now able to stand on his own 4 paws. And who do I have to thank for that? Margaret. And then I learned that furnishing giant MFI has written a report recommending that I'm to be retired to the country. Well, am I being punished for bringing the nation to its knees again? Margaret says that I'll have sardines where I'm going. I'll be able to play with balls of wool and go back to catching mice in an old-fashioned, chivalrous way, but I'd simply hate to be sent away to enjoy all these things. Why would I want to go off to this so-called paradise when I've got Margaret? And there's another reason I want to stay. In just 7 years, I'll have finally paid off the mortgage on my cat basket. I'll own it again. Just like I did in the bad old days of Ted, Harold, and Jim.
Political Animals was written by Tony Bagley, and the voice of Wilberforce was provided by Clive Swift.